Well, here we go again. Frank Watson here, uh, having a little bit of a bite of breakfast and getting ready to be joined by Tom Probasco and John Lowe. There's John. Hello, John. We need for you to unmute. Well, as we continue to struggle with there's Tom.
Hold on.
Hello. Hi, John.
How are we doing?
Hi there, folks. I gotta get this audio going.
What do you say, Tom?
I've got it. Oh, I just found the button. I had the audio, but not the video. All right. I got them both.
So, for anybody that might care to join us, this is Frank Watson. To my left is John Lowe and Tom Probasco, and we are Adventures in Geriatric Technology. And our motto is the universe and beyond. So we'll, I'm sure, cover a lot of territory. I think we're recording. I think I did that. Yep, it's recording.
So I wanted to tell John something real quick. John, you sent something yesterday, I think it was, and when I tried to open it, it was just like computer code or something. I couldn't open the document. Did you try to open that, Frank, or do you remember?
I don't. Yeah, it wouldn't open. It has to be downloaded, I think. But
well, I did that too, and still, when it did, it didn't have the text. It had just like computer code. I'll call it, not knowing any better.
We had talked about psychopaths, and I'd sent a printout, quite extensive one, more than I wanted. All I wanted to do was just present a summary at the end, and somehow it recorded the whole blessed, must have been like 22 pages, and I didn't know if you read all that or not. And then you had, I think, sent me another article similar to that on your side, Tom.
Yeah, that was an NPR piece from several years ago.
I see. And so I'm not sure that's what you got from me, a summary of that longer.
Oh, maybe, yeah. Because when you sent the first one about psychopathology,
yeah,
I did scroll down and read the summary.
Well, good.
Yeah, but the one I got, and maybe that's what you're saying. The one I got that we got yesterday, Frank and I got yesterday. That's one that wouldn't open properly. But maybe if you were just trying to send the summary, I've already scrolled down to pick that up.
Right. Well, anyway, we had discussed that briefly. There was just one among various things we had raised.
Right.
One on, we had talked about suffering, and let's see, I alluded to questioning the human being as a questioning creature. And I don't know where you'd want to go with the things we raised from the last discussion.
Well, there's
Yeah, go
there's
ahead.
one of one of the things about sociopathic personalities that I have read, and that is studies indicating that the most effective leadership of corporate leadership is a sociopathic personality. And I guess I can kind of see how that would work, that would be functional. Because if you don't really care what happens to people, you can look at the numbers and make rational decisions about the good of the corporation. I think that there's probably some cautions there. It's like having a vicious guard dog or something. You have to limit its activities and make sure that you use it in a kind of a targeted way. And I'm not sure that happens with corporations. I'm pretty sure it doesn't. We live in the house that Jack built, and some things which are functional, that were functional as they developed over time and evolution, I think are probably there's a reason for everything, but sometimes in the current life, you have to remember that some things, some behaviors don't work out evolutionarily. That's one way of looking at the world. There are
what I determined from some of the studies that have been attempted to figure out why there is this problem of the psychopaths. Can you hear me? I know you're pulling closer.
Yes.
I have to project quite a bit here. And one thing was that they did not find any gene, one isolated gene that was the cause. Possibly there were a number of genes in relationship might be a factor. Then they raised, the prenatal period while the child is being formed in the mother's womb. The negativity of the mother. Did she smoke? Did she have a lot of stress? All that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And there seem to be maybe some reasons for that would affect a child becoming a psychopath. However, a number of people had the same stresses and did not turn out that way. And then there were the period from birth to 3 years of age, same kind of negativity, stresses of one kind or another. Yes, that seemed to maybe follow through. Yet, scores of people had the same problems, didn't turn out to be psychopaths. And then one thing that was interesting to me was that I think it was the cortex of the brain. There was something missing in the development of the psychopath having to do with the cortex. And Tom, if this rings a bell with you at all, I think it was the cortex. And a factor that would resist radical change. Let's put it that a radical activity of some kind, something that would hesitate you from acting out. If you follow what I'm saying here, a hesitancy, part of the brain there within the structure of the brain that would prevent you from acting out something that was negative. And did seem to be a factor. Then I'm wondering too, maybe we all have this ability within the brain to resist something very, very negative. And I'm thinking of, of course, I'm just speculating here, but I'm thinking of addicts who resist maybe at first of getting into drugs, one kind or another, but then they give way to it, and therefore weaken this part of this brain that it really is built in structure to prevent you from acting out antisocially, let's say. Well, it's just I'm wondering about that.
Yeah,
But anyway, yeah, go ahead.
well, it made me think of the link I sent you to the researcher who was looking at a sociopathology, and he had identified brain structures that he could look, and very predictive of who was and who wasn't.
Yeah, yeah.
And then he did his own and discovered right there it was. And when he talked to his family about it, they go, "Yeah, we knew that." So it's as though there's a continuum, and it's affected by a lot of things, not only physicality, brain structure, and all that impacts that, but also family life. So it's not this or that. And I think I hear that in some of the things you're saying in terms of it's pretty complex matter. And we all think of, when you think sociopathology, you think of Hannibal Lecter or somebody, you see in movies and that type of thing, and certainly in some mass murder, and certainly those exist. But there's a continuum, kind of like, well, I don't know, kind of like what, autism. That may not be a good example, but it's not either or. It's not strictly this or that.
Well, you mentioned one of the factors too that brought out in this study, it did seem to run in families. You mentioned family, and it's more pronounced in families, in a line of families. But I'm not sure if that follows everything what you're saying there.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. I mean, that was the thing. When he discovered he had exactly that brain structure that he could had identified, and there he had it. And when he went to his family, they were like, "Yeah, that's not." They weren't surprised, and yet he wasn't. Here he was, a responsible person, married, had kids. Um, living a quote unquote normal life. So even if he had these tendencies, other factors had influenced his behavior and outlook.
Then the thing is, the thing is that too, if it is something that's unavoidable for some people, that they don't have a will to alter it, therefore is not in control, in a way sort of helpless in their condition, what effect would this have on morality and justice systems? Uh, you know, penalties or hospitalization. How would you remedy this in our social structure as far as justice is concerned, and penal punishment, or or lack of punishment rather than therapy? What do you agree with them? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking, and I suggested later that unfettered capitalism is and this kind of goes to that. I think is a kind of it's a sociopathic structure, so that there are people without. You mentioned I think you mentioned the will. I think it has more to do with people's. So this researcher, for instance, that was in the NPR piece, had no idea that he had that. His own brain had that structure, but he was born into a situation where he had supports that steered him in some direction that those born in other circumstances would not have been able to benefit from, is how I took that piece that came out years ago. So some of it has to do with structural things. And I think a book I'm reading right now, that I won't go into that, but it suggests that capitalism, unfettered capitalism, is itself sociopathic, kind of like what Frank was talking about. If the rules, if you're leading a corporation, and the most effective leaders might be those who are simply looking at the quote unquote bottom line. And if that's the system we have, then it's itself a sociopathic system, in the sense that it does not seem to address human suffering or fairness very much, if at all. That's kind of a jumbled way to put all that, but
well, fairness is a big word for morality, and it's a root of one of the moral arguments that C.S. Lewis brings out very strongly. We know when something is fair and when it isn't, and sometimes this transcends herd or self. What's the word? I have trouble with my words. Herd instinct. The other is survival. Survival instinct, and fairness sometimes goes above that, beyond that, to something that's innate. But anyway, there is this problem, I think, with in a culture that disregards suffering and pain for over and against money and profit. That's always a problem. However, if you would go too far the other direction into socialism and communism, especially communism, the value of the human being then is lost. The value of the individual, if you would just go to the idea of just following what the state says, you become less and less an individual. So we have to maintain the infinite value of every human being, and at the same time, the suffering that goes with competition and so forth. And there's good to competition too, but to go that too far that way overlooks the suffering and disregards the suffering and the fairness of things.
When let's turn our focus in the opposite direction, and let's talk about who is the we that you refer to, and how do you define that? How do you come to the conclusion that there is a we that has to be concerned with these things?
What do you mean, humanity? Or
that would be one way of saying it. Is
society? Society?
Is it all of humanity? Is humanity separate from society? You have you have culture, and you have words, and words have energy and power. How do we define the we? And I say, how do we define we?
Mm-hmm.
And that gets complicated. Who defines?
Well, it depends on what pole you want to look at it. First of all, humanity is a universal. It covers the human. There's no particular human we're talking about. We're talking about humanity, all humanity. That's an abstraction, a universal. Are we talking about Frank, the particular human being? He's a particular. So you have the universal and you have the particular. And it depends what size the concrete is. Well, it'd be your family. Yeah, that's a smaller group, a particular group. Or you're talking about society that becomes more and more universal, which becomes more of an abstract. So I'm throwing that out to you.
Well, you have also political groups.
Sure.
Yeah, not just groups, but you have nations to consider. You have church groups, whether you're Catholic or Presbyterian or, you know,
Mhm.
uh,
United Brethren or
yeah. So uh,
Quaker.
there, the universal we
Mhm.
changes depending on where you stand and which group you are aligned with, and when you say all of humanity, uh, I think that I think that's important to consider because in the current state of affairs, all of humanity is at risk. When you've got colleges like universities like MIT projecting the near-term collapse of civilization as the greatest likelihood of in a near future, I think we have to look and say, how does all of humanity have a voice? Who, you know, who speaks for all of humanity? There is the United Nations, and how does that function? How does it work? Are there alternatives? How do they work? Do each of us speak through our own nation state? How many different ways can we speak for all of humanity? And I think that one of the claims of Christianity is that Jesus uh, uh, addressed all of humanity. If we look at if we look at humanity as a whole, uh, how do you determine the expressed will of that whole? These are questions I think we have to look at.
Well, you mentioned humanity, but also that includes history. How far back do you go in solving the problem of where we're at and where we'll go? So humanity broadens, as far as time is concerned and history, or is it just now? And now is important though too. So where do we learn about where we're at? And can we learn from the past of where we might be going?
I think that that past, all of which in geological terms is fairly recent, is very instructive. And when we look at, for instance, the psychology of groups that are very authoritarian, I there's a song I know about someone yearning for the good old days in Scotland, and when a man could swear allegiance to his lord, and the head of the clans were very arbitrary. A clan chief didn't have to have a reason. All he had to do was say, "Take that man and hang him," and the man would be taken and hung. You know, for whatever reason, if the chief said do it, you just did it. And that power was similar to that of kings. But then, of course, the arbitrary kingship, which was hereditary and power based, the power was siphoned off by, first the noble class, the landowners, then the manufacturing class, all very conservative in the sense that it tended to want to conserve the interests of the powerful, of those who were stationed at the top of that group, of any particular group. And those groups tend to be inbred. If you look at the hereditary royalty, all over the Europe, you had any particular king was a first cousin to a king somewhere at the other end of the European community. The King of France might be related to the king of, would be related in some way or another because of the
Inbreeding?
Yeah,
Yeah.
So then you would have to look at like serfs. They might and quite likely would be inbred in very local groups. So there's strong cultural.
What about what about Amish people today? So we have sort of similar a bit there with the serfdom, people close to the land, and they don't go out and fight, but they're protected, pretty much by governments above them, so forth. And so it would be easy for us to go, well, let's go back to the land and back to the simple living, a bit of living,
and in a way, if a government simply treats such groups fairly, they might lead a more satisfactory life than the ones who were running the government.
But now, well, let's ask the question: how Christian are these Amish people? Now, I have a story back during the time of the hippies, with the young people rebelling against Vietnam and all that. I had a student that was a Catholic young guy and had a wife that was somewhat crippled. And he was very idealistic, and he said, I want to become one of these, I hate to say Amish, but it was sort of like that type of community. So he put on the clothing, all that, the hat, the flat hat, and all that sort of thing, and went back and tried to live that way. And they were so mean to him and his wife that such a caste sort of prejudice against them, it was so painful. I mean, they tried it for a while, but they were almost shunned because they were outsiders. And so he had to leave, and he came back and became a devout Catholic again. So because it's smaller and closer down by the earth, that doesn't mean that the sin is not there. We have a sin problem. I know a man who, well, I know of a case, happened to be on one of these Dateline shows, you know, Dateline, I got projected a little bit better. Anyway, they go to this little town where everybody knew everybody, you know, and well, gee, this was great. They could left the doors open at night, unlocked and so forth. And so within that group, the daughter was raped and murdered in this little town, which everybody knew. So isn't this a deeper problem? No matter of sin, no matter where you go.
Well, yeah. Yes, I would say that that's.
And so it's capitalism, but also on the small and the little and the close. What about the Hatfields and the McCoys? What about farm? And there was this story with Anthony Hopkins, who wanted to go to Montana, away from all the problems of the world. He had 4 sons, and one wanted to go World War One in the worst way, and another brother, he'll go and help protect him. Another brother went into business and became a politician, and the one was killed, and so forth and so on. And all he wanted to find out when going to Montana to get away from all that, it all failed because none of his sons turned out the way he wanted them to. One was a vagabond, then he just went off and just went all over.
I think one of the interesting exercises I've kind of envisioned in looking at illness or dysfunction and how it works with people and groups. I came to ask myself, what does functional look like in terms of individuals and groups? What does healthy look like in individuals and groups? And where can I find examples of it? And I kind of look around me as I go through and, you know, try to understand who is living in a good way, and given that we all have one challenge or another, who is addressing their challenges. And I ask myself, what does it mean for me to be healthy? How can what life do I want to lead? And I think that asking that question, what life do I want to lead? What life do I see as being truly life-giving, is important.
Well,
And
it brings us to a hierarchy of values. You're really asking, what's the highest value for you?
yes,
To live this life that you want. So this is a question I think we all have to ask. What's the highest value that I give? We all have an ultimate concern, as Paul Tillich, a Protestant theologian, brings out. We all have an ultimate, something you give yourself to. Now, it may be something a capitalist could be, or it could be a communist. That's what he gives his life to. Could be an atheist, gives his life. So we all have something we give ourselves to. Could be mediocrity. So in a way, sort of then, what's your highest value? And what about the hierarchy of values? What's the highest?
well, Tom, take it.
Well, it reminds me, you talk about hierarchy of values, and there's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That was something I remember from a class from ages ago, but I think they're related.
Oh yeah, it should be. Yeah.
So you could say, presumably, Maslow, of course, he was from the Western world, but he established this hierarchy of needs. So I think it's integrally related with hierarchy of values. But we were talking about society and culture, and terms like that, concepts like that, those will determine one way or the other, along with the individual, what that is for the individual person. But that's what when you
Well,
said
sure. Yeah, but
hierarchy
it
values.
doesn't have to go back though, eventually to the individual person. Sure, he'll be influenced by all kinds of things, especially family and so forth and so on, the church, and but he has to be a mature person, I think. You could be swayed by someone over authority over you. You do it because they say so. Now, this is a good thing when you're quite young. Up to a 5-year-old, they need to be told and they need to be guided, and sometimes with discipline and so forth. You don't want your child running out in the street and being killed. You stay in, so forth and so on. But when they become an adolescence, then they need to start thinking on their own to some degree. It's a difficult period.
Yeah.
When to assert yourself and yet at the same time not overdo it. If you're 35 years of age and your parents are still telling you what to do, that ain't good.
Yeah.
And so what determines whether you're a mature person or not? To me, it's if you're persuaded.
Yeah. I think that's, yeah. And you mentioned this earlier. I mean, no group, whether it's, this may be not directly related to that, but no group, whether, you talked about leaving a simpler life on the land. Well, it's not really a simple life. Um, it's pretty complex to live as the Amish live. Uh, and everybody's going to there's going to be problems. There's going to be, uh, there's going to be people who are harmful to other people. And so we get into concepts of justice. How is that meted out?
Fairness and justice. Yeah, what's fair?
Yeah, yeah, back to that. Yeah.
So when we look at humanity as a whole, and we look at the individual who is trying to determine what is the best possible life for him or her, we have to ask, life within what boundaries or what context or what considerations. And it seems to me that one of the things that the individual ultimately has to consider in considering the whole, considering all of life, we are related to everything that breathes. Everything that lives on this planet breathes in one way or another. And we look at our own existence, and I think we have to say, okay, I don't know how we got here. I think that in my particular case, I see this is related to the God question. And I don't know exactly what we what we consist of as a whole. But something inside of me says it's not enough just to live for my life. I have children, I have grandchildren, I have a dog,